Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I am your host, George Blitch, and I'm really excited for you guys to tune in to this interview that I just did with Danielle Prewett. If you guys are not aware, she is about to put out her very first cookbook. It is called MeatEater's Wild and Whole Seasonal Recipes for the Conscious Cook. It's really great. We talk all about it and how it's kind of divided up in 4 different seasons. So it's not just the things you can hunt maybe during the spring, summer, fall, or winter, but it's also what's growing or what you might be able to grow in your garden and how you can pair these things together. This whole approach to wild and whole started as a blog that she did, years ago, and eventually it got her picked up and brought out to Pheasants Forever and their big annual event, and had her, doing a cooking presentation where she met Steve Ranella and Yanni from MeatEater, as well as Doug Duran, a mutual friend of ours who was there, and kind of they invited her into working under, MeatEater Inc. because it kind of went from the show to now being, a huge juggernaut in the outdoor industry, right? There's so many different things that are underneath this umbrella. And they brought Danielle in, and kind of she was the, cooking wild food contributor, editor, content creator, and there's a lot of different hats that she's worn there through. But check out the show notes below because I'll have links to those, a lot of the recipes she shares there. But this book is absolutely incredible. I think you guys are going to thoroughly enjoy it. We had a great time chatting about it today. Kind of give a little bit more insight into what was important about her putting this book together in the way that she did, and really what it is that she hopes that the readers take away from this. And I just think you guys are thoroughly going to enjoy it. Make sure you place your orders. And again, that is MeatEater's Wild and Whole Seasonal Recipes for the Conscious Cook by Danielle Prewett. And you guys enjoy this podcast. I think you're really going to learn a lot from this and what Danielle has to share. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure you share it with a friend. And thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate all the support. Take care. Hey, Danielle, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. I'm super excited to chat with you. Your cookbook's about to drop. Wild and Whole Seasonal Recipes for the Conscious Cook.
Uh-huh.
Congratulations on that. I've read through it. Love it. I am very excited to try out some recipes. My wife and I are kind of circled a few that we're going to check out. So,
Great.
before we kind of get into chatting about that, though, I really want to kind of pull out of my guests. I'd like to introduce them to the listeners as far as if you can give me some background on kind of where you grew up, how you got involved with your love for the outdoors and cooking and hunting, and kind of we'll just thread that through there, and eventually
Yeah.
start chatting about the cookbook a little more.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in Texas based, right?
Yes,
You're in East
yes.
Texas. Is that right?
I'm
East
I'm just
Texas?
outside of Houston.
Okay, where outside of Houston?
And Katie?
Oh, okay. So well, I was in Houston.
Uh-huh.
I know you asked me questions about me, now I'm
Yeah.
asking you.
All good. All
Um,
good.
yeah, so yeah, I'm Texas based, born and raised in Texas. I'm from North Texas, Wichita Falls, which my husband gives me a hard time. He calls me an Oklahoman, but I am south of the Red River.
It's
That's
Texas. Yeah.
important. Yeah, so that's where I was born and raised. But my dad is from South Dakota. He and his family had a farm, big farm in South Dakota, and that was kind of a big part of my life upbringing. We'd travel there for the holidays to visit family. He would go hunting with his buddies often, and it was really the boys that went out, and I always stayed back with my grandma. And like that Thanksgiving, we always had pheasant, like fried pheasant. We always did a big chicken fry with pheasant. And so like hunting was always like there in my life, but I was never really a hunter until I went to college, met my husband. Um, just a classic story of a college kid met at a bar. I don't know why I'm telling that part. I think it's because today nobody meets at in person anymore.
Right.
It's like it's sort of a funny thing. But he asked me out on a date to the gun range, and so that was kind of our first introduction, and which was fun. It was a fun day, and I thought it was pretty adorable. And that the second date was a dinner at his house because he had just shot a deer. He was sighting in a rifle at the gun range, and so the second date was successful deer hunt. Came back, and he was really proud to serve me backstrap. which, I was just kind of like, all right, whatever. But I remember the way, like, it was very endearing the way that this was something that was really special because, he shot it and he was like, you can't buy this at a grocery store. And I really decided to share it with you. And I loved it. Um, and so that was kind of the sort of introduction to who he was in his life and why hunting mattered to him. And, over the years, as we dated and eventually got married, he was doing, you know, he's just an avid outdoorsman. He's a very salty guy now. He's very fishy, but he truly is sort of um opportunistic hunter in the sense that wherever you live, especially in a state like Texas, he's all about taking advantage of whatever opportunities are available near you, which I'll get into later.
Mhm.
But he was always bringing game home for me to cook, and I was fascinated because I loved food. I loved cooking. I actually went to school for fashion design, apparel design, and manufacturing. Totally different than what I'm doing now. But I didn't love it after college, and I kind of wanted to like get into something new, something else. And so cooking was something that I really wanted to just pursue. I wanted to go to culinary school after I just graduated college, and I was like, yeah, maybe I don't know. I didn't want to work in the restaurant industry,
Right.
and life just took a really hard detour whenever we um, got a call from his company, who works in oil and gas, to go to North Dakota. And that's sort of like where I like to say the story for me with hunting really began, because the opportunities there and the lifestyle was just so different than anything I'd ever known in Texas. I mean, dramatically different. And so I mean, in Texas, I would go dove hunting with him. Yeah, I feel like that's just like a part of our culture in Texas,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
dove hunting. But dove hunting to me, I mean, it's dove hunting is not hunting, but it's not quite as in depth as, big game and upland hunting. It's a great thing to do with your friends and blow the dust off your shotgun. But it wasn't until I moved to North Dakota where everything just like totally took off. And so we got a bird dog, and that was sort of the hook for me in wanting to get out in the field, was to watch my dog work, because I think it's just fascinating to just see a dog do whatever they're born to do.
Yeah.
And so she was great getting me out in the field, and I tagged the whole first year hunting season. I just brought a camera because I was perfectly content not having a gun. I just wanted to be out there. And finally my husband's like, well, get a hunting license, get a gun, and let's take this to the next level. And so I did. And I remember shooting my first pheasant, was in the cattails. Marina flushed, but Marina is my golden retriever. She's 13 now.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, oh, it's hard seeing a dog, your first bird dog. Anyway, yeah, so she flushed my first bird for me, right in front of me, and I shot it and it fell in the cattails, which I thought we would never find. And she brought it back, and it was just a really perfect little outing in the morning. And then I went home and I prepared it. And by that point, I'd been cooking game for a handful of years. And so it was like cooking pheasant was not new to me, especially since I grew up eating it. But this was the first time I had eaten anything that I had shot. And then all of a sudden, I remember like I had just sort of this aha moment where everything fell into place. And I felt this unbelievable amount of gratitude for that bird. And not just for the bird, for the habitat, for the place that I was hunting, that it was preserved by, the state, that it was taken care of, that like there were just so many things about like how that bird got to my table that I was grateful for. And that sort of really became the trigger point where I said, like, I want to eat this way every time. Like, I should feel this good about eating meat every single time. And I knew that the reason was because I had that intimate connection with the landscape, with the bird. And that's the way I wanted to eat for the rest of my life. And here I am.
Well, and you kind of talked about how you started this passion project of Wild and Whole, and you were doing a blog, but at first you weren't really telling a lot of people about it. You were just kind of going through and doing this for yourself, it seems. And then was that when you kind of started that, was there an idea that you're like kind of wanted to maybe make that shift and transition? Did you have kind of an approach to how you wanted to maybe make your own mark in this outdoor industry, or was that even a thought at that point in time when you launched that?
Yeah, I want to say this was like 8 or 10 years ago. I can't remember when. I had people telling me you should start a blog, and I didn't want to start a blog because at that point in time, blogs were like all the rage, and it was mostly people talking about their cat for, forever and ever till you got to the recipe at the end. And still today, now people don't talk about their cat, but now they tell you everything you need to know about like that ingredient, and it's super annoying. But so for that reason, I didn't want to tell anybody because I was like, oh, I don't know what people will think about it. I'm very hard on myself, and I'm a perfectionist, and so I wasn't like ready to show this thing out in the world because I felt like I needed time to develop a brand that I was really proud of. So on one hand, it was sort of a hobby because I wanted to play around with food photography. I needed that creative outlet. And on the other hand, it was knowing that there was something missing in the hunting and fishing world, with regards to food and recipes, and needing to tap into that. Because at that time when I was looking for recipes, I was seeing a whole lot of burgers and poppers and not much else. And it was really tailored to like this very narrow field of like, this is just for the hunters, is very male dominated. And I had made a decision that I wanted to hunt for all of our protein. And so to me, game was just just a meat source. It was the same as beef, chicken, pork. It was just a different animal. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't see it as like hunting and domestic. Like, I didn't see it like that. And I saw this like bigger holistic view of what food is. And I think that's partly shaped by the way I grew up. We had an emu farm. And so like as a child, like I was like all animals were food, unless they were illegal. Like all animals was food, and I didn't like have this like beef, chicken, pork like compartmentalized brain. And I wanted my blog to sort of represent that in a holistic way, and showing that like these animals fit into your regular weeknight meals just like anything else. They're no different. However, now I kind of see that a lot of times some of these animals are very difficult to hunt. You may only get one turkey a year, one beautiful mallard a year. And so I'm like, that's when you really want to celebrate that animal. That like, what do you do with it? And so that's what that blog was sort of born out of. Wild and Whole. It wasn't just recipes for wild game, but it was also everything else on your plate. What are you pairing it with? Because I had a firm conviction on connecting to my protein, but I wanted the same for everything else. So, it's been an evolution, but today, I really care about, like flour. Where am I buying my flour from? Cooking oil, salt. Now, not every, I mean, I still go to HEB, don't get me wrong. Like, I still go and like buy that stuff, but I'm conscious of it.
Sure. Well, and we'll chat about that too, and kind of your seasonal approach to the cookbook too, and how you're kind of pairing a lot of things that are fresh ingredients at that time, whether it's in the garden or whether it's foraging. But I think that that's a really interesting way that you kind of put that cookbook, together. And again, we'll dive into that. I kind of wanted to thread one more needle there, and that was kind of how you took another step forward with, kind of eventually working with MeatEater. But, you talked about the blog, it got picked up, and there's an article, and then eventually National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic from Pheasants Forever invited you out for doing a presentation at the wild game cooking stage. And
Mhm.
in that, you ended up meeting with Steve Ranella, Yanni, and our mutual friend Doug Duran, and kind of had a conversation. This was right when MeatEater was about to make a big shift into MeatEater Inc. and kind of the things they were doing. And at that point in time, they kind of brought you in to do some work with them. And I kind of wanted you to maybe just chat a little bit about that experience and what that looked
Yeah.
like then and how long you've been with them now.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, I kept it secret, and I don't know how it became not secret, other than the North Dakota Game and Fish contacted me, wanted to do a story. And so they did that. And then somebody from Pheasants Forever saw that story and said, "Hey, we should have her come out to do cooking demonstrations at the Pheasant Fest." And so I had agreed to do that. And in the meantime, a friend, Nicole Qualteri, she's in the hunting and fishing industry as well. She was working with Steve at ZPZ. This is
Yep.
ZPZ days. Um, and she's like, "Oh, you should meet Danielle. You're gonna be at the event together," because Steve was the keynote speaker that year. And so set up just like a little breakfast with Yanni and Doug Duran, and met him for the first time, which was pretty cool. At the time, I hate to admit I wasn't really familiar with MeatEater, so I was just kind of like rolling in with breakfast, just a regular old breakfast with somebody, um, which is probably a good thing. Otherwise, today I think I would have been intimidated to
Right,
go out
right.
for breakfast. So luckily, I wasn't very familiar with them. Um, anyway, so yeah, and this was pre MeatEater Inc. I don't know if anybody has followed our company for long enough to know that um, it sort of became a bigger umbrella, and it grew to involve a lot of voices in the hunting and fishing world, like Mark Kenyon, Ryan Callahan. So like I joined MeatEater when we were just a handful of people in a room with a whiteboard, and it was really fascinating to see this company grow, because we had the foundation and the core ethics that have always been a part of MeatEater and will always stay a part of MeatEater. And no matter how big we've grown or what we've done and all the things we do, that core belief of nature enriching our lives and protecting and conservation, it will always be there. And so it's been fascinating. Now I've been there over 6 years, I think. I've been there a while.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Um, so it's been a wild journey to just kind of be a part of this company and to continue to grow. And it's weird because when I started, like I wanted to create recipes and develop recipes. I wanted to be in the food industry. I had no intentions of being like a social media person. Still don't. Still, I mean, it's totally a part of my job and my life. But like, I would have never like picked this route if I had to. It's just
Sure.
kind of the way the nature goes. But yeah, it's everything's changed over the years, and so it's been cool to watch it grow.
Well, and I've kind of followed that journey for a while. I know you've done a lot of work with a lot of different people, and it kind of Wild and Whole has been developing over the years. You're doing a lot of content creation. Obviously, you're a big part of producing and getting out and editing all sorts of different amazing recipes. And it was just, I feel like, inevitable that at some point in time you'd have a cookbook. But I was kind of curious when that first took shape in your mind, like that you decided, you know what, I want to do this. And how did that look like? Because I mean, it takes a long time to put together books, and yet alone cookbooks where you're trying out which
Yeah,
recipes are going to make it. Because I'm sure you have a big basket to choose from, and then you have
yeah,
272 pages that you're narrowing down. Plus, you want to talk about your stories, your introduction, what's important to you. So, I was kind
yeah.
of curious what that looked like. How long of a process was that? And yeah, just kind of what
Long,
was that like for you? I'm sure.
long. I was approached by some publishers. about 4 years ago. And at that time, there were some small publishing houses, and I was like, I don't know. Cookbooks are a really big deal to me. I want to put my heart and soul into it. These weren't really the publishers I wanted to go for. And had gotten enough publishers that we said, hey, let's go ahead and get an agent. And people are interested in the idea of a wild and whole cookbook. Let's put together a proposal and send it out to the publishers. So I spent like probably 8 months developing a proposal. And so a proposal, for anybody unfamiliar, the proposal is basically like you got a whole cookbook that's, say, 200-300 pages. The proposal is just like a 30-page document that gives you just the snapshot view of like, what is this book about? Why am I the one to write this book? Like, why am I authority on wild game? What are the recipes? Like, what does this book look like? And that was really hard to kind of like do, because Wild and Whole over the years wasn't just about cooking and recipes anymore. It was about, I wanted it to be more of a lifestyle cookbook that inspired people to get outside. I got a big reason why I wanted to start hunting was to be able to eat more sustainably. And the longer that I hunt, the more I realize what that actually means and what it means to eat consciously and to think about all the factors, the way agriculture plays a big role in the wildlife, and then why it matters that we should care about the sustainability of our food system, how food production works, because it very much affects our wildlife. If you look at statistics on like how much of the grasslands we've lost, just habitat in general, you can see like farms that are regenerative and increasing biodiversity, our wildlife gets better. So as a hunter, I wanted to tell the story of why the food choices you make matter. And I think it's in a world where you hear a lot about food sustainability from like anti-meat eaters to like the other carnivore aspect. No one has really told that from the perspective of a hunter who cares about the conservation of wildlife and habitats as a whole, and not just what's our carbon footprint. It's a bigger picture of biodiversity. So as I started working on this cookbook, it just like, it really became this journey of writing the story of like how to eat consciously for me. And when I really start to piece that together, I realized that eating through the seasons was very important, not just from a perspective of like eating seasonally means that you're eating locally. So you're supporting like local farmers, if you go to a farmer's market or anything, or if you garden, but in the wildlife, like I hunt and fish year round, and I love to forage. And so every season there was something to get very excited about. And I think most people, when you open a cookbook, they say, okay, I've got beef, or say if you're specifically thinking of wild game, you're like, okay, I have an elk steak. Let me go to the big game chapter, and here's the steak recipe. I wanted to show it a little bit differently in terms of what time of the year is it? What are you most excited about? When you think about the spring, you're thinking about turkeys. You're thinking in Texas, for me, it's dewberries on the vine. Like it's
yeah.
all those fun things to get excited. The white bass run. Like there's a lot of different things to get super excited about in any given time of the year. And so when you look at things from that perspective, you're more bound to get outside and be in nature, which is what I wanted this book to be about. Like get outside and get excited about getting your food. And so it took me about 8 months to write the proposal, and we sent it off to publishers, and I had a handful of people interested. 4 out of the big 5 publishing companies wanted to publish my book. And what they do is you go to like an auction. I met with all of them, and they all wanted to publish, and Penguin Random House kind of swooped me up from under the table. And so after that, I spent a little over a year writing the actual book, because I wanted the head notes to tell a story.
Mhm.
I always say there's a story behind every meal if you're willing to look for it. And so I wanted that book to be filled with those stories. And so I spent the whole year going through the seasons, telling the stories of everything that, like you see like a picture of like a mule deer I shot in Montana. All the venison recipes are that mule deer. And so like you kind of piece that kind of stuff together. And so, yeah, I spent a long time, and then it was supposed to release last year, but we were still in the midst of like the effects of COVID and the supply chain issues. And so there was a paper shortage, and I had to basically get pushed back a whole year on publication. So this book has been in the making for a good 3 years or more.
Oh, wow. And so that's quite a journey. I didn't realize about the paper shortage too, but I'm sure that affected a lot of people in the midst of
Yeah.
writing, and so hit the pause button there. Um, there's some amazing, obviously amazing dishes, great recipes. But I also really enjoyed a lot of the photography. And you worked with Angie Mosier, and I was curious, how did you guys end up, working together? Is it someone you knew ahead of time? Because that's a big thing. I mean, I've chatted a lot with other, wild game chefs, Jesse Griffith's mutual friend, and, choosing what photographer to work with is a big deal. And I was just kind of curious how that came about and
Yeah.
how y'all did shooting. Was this something where they came to your house, or did you guys go to a kitchen where you were preparing and had everything
That's a
kind of
great
lit up?
question. There was a big debate on how we were going to shoot this. Because I wanted morels, I wanted chanterelles, I wanted
Hmm.
and you can't have one cookbook shoot and have a bunch of seasonal ingredients. It was so challenging. So Angie Mosier was a good friend of Kevin Gillespie's,
Hmm.
who used to be with MeatEater. And I'm still friends with Kevin, and she's shot a ton of cookbooks. And so we decided to go with her, and she's just very, very talented. And the biggest challenge was figuring out when we were going to do the shoot. And we decided to do 2 shoots. So one was in the summer that would photograph spring and summer, and then the other was like in January for the fall and the winter chapters. So yeah, it was hard to figure out how to shoot it, because I had to pick my favorite things, basically. Like, if I did it in the spring, I'm going to miss out on the beautiful heirloom tomatoes. So, and I actually did the first shoot in Atlanta, and I like the tomatoes in my garden were popping, and I had just green zebras and black creme and like everything. And so I boxed them all up and like patted it, and I didn't want to close the box because they needed to breathe. So I kept the box open and put it in a carry-on bag. Like, it was like a totally ridiculous carry-on bag of boxed tomatoes and like all this stuff from my garden, and flew with it to Atlanta for the cookbook shoot. Um, and then some of the photos, actually a handful of photos I did myself. A lot of the ones in the field, especially like bird hunting. Some of the food photography I did myself. And a lot of the just moments in the field were my photos.
Yeah. Well, there's some amazing shots in there. And one of the things that I was kind of taken back by as well was that this is not only just wild game and some things that are like, obviously things you can forage or in your garden. And I usually think about meals that are, kind of protein based there too. There's also some desserts in there as well for those to, have that final bite. Some amazing things there. You had like sweet corn ice cream, chai
Oh yeah.
spice parsnip cake with cream cheese frosting. There were some amazing dishes, which is just cool because I haven't seen a lot of dessert stuff in wild game associated cookbooks. So I thought that was
Yeah.
kind of a fun, kind of you got your appetizer type thing, main meal, and there's a lot of
Yeah,
diversity
yeah,
there.
it's this book is not just wild game recipes.
Mhm.
That's a good thing to bring up. The desserts, like I love like a duck fat chocolate chip cookie. And there's a dewberry dessert. I wanted to sort of incorporate other ingredients that I frequently cook with, because in real life I don't just cook with wild game only. And I also included domestic animals for that reason that I was saying before, that I think agriculture plays a really important part of our wildlife. And for a long time, I only ate wild game as our protein. And it wasn't until I started this book that I realized that it was really important to support farmers who shared the same common goal that I did. And so I met with Will Harris at White Oak Pastures in
Mhm.
Georgia. And so for me, it was like the first time in 10 years that I had cooked like beef, chicken, or pork. And I had like a really weirdly difficult time doing so. Like I felt like I had made this like moral pact with myself that I only wanted to eat an animal in which I had like we had intimate like connection to, like through hunting. But so I had a hard time just going to buy meat. And so it took me some time to like, it sounds really silly, but it took me a little time to kind of get used to that idea. But it really came from the fact that like these small farmers were really making an impact, and I wanted my dollar to support them and what they were doing. And so that became really important. So you will find recipes, like there's a really great pork chop recipe in there. There's one for beef cheeks in the winter chapter. So it's a very it and there's a vegetarian recipe in every chapter because I like really love vegetables. Like I cannot get enough vegetables. It's not a popular thing I share a lot on social media, but yeah, it'll be the only wild game cookbook with a vegetarian recipe.
Well, it's important. No, I think it is, and you kind of talk about this idea like what we eat is like what our food eats, right? And you're incorporating some of that. I know that when, in the spring, I'm picking dewberries and I'm trying to make some type of, buttery glazed sauce to incorporate with my turkey. In the summertime, if I'm getting a squirrel and there's maybe wild persimmons, trying to do some type of, or even cactus fruit, like different things that incorporate what's there in that point in time. And I think it's a fun thing to just kind of tie in, but
Oh
especially
yeah,
when it might be the food that, or these animals are eating too, and
true.
sometimes just highlighting those. So I think that's a really fun thing to see that and to think about it like that. And I kind of wanted to, you talked about that excitement of the different types of the season, because obviously you have spring, summer, fall, winter. And,
Mhm.
if you can maybe kind of expand on that ideas, and maybe what are some of those that you're most excited about in each of those seasons that you kind of highlight here in your book?
Um, gosh, that's a hard question. I should have my cookbook out near me. I have like a whole box of 100 of them over there. But I'd say in the spring, I have a recipe for a turkey cutlet with asparagus and morels, and I made this like okay, the turkey cutlet is breaded and fried because I mean it's just good.
Yeah.
Like right, like nobody gets upset about a turkey cutlet. But I wanted something to like really acidic to kind of like just make it pop, something fresh. Asparagus is in season in the spring, and it's got a lot of lemons in it. And one thing that I think is really interesting is that morels and asparagus have a really similar earthy kind of quality to it. And even though morels are very notoriously difficult to find in Texas, maybe if you're in northeast Texas, little east of Dallas, you're probably more frequently to find them. But I tested this recipe with fresh morels and also dried morels. They both worked fantastically, and that's a side dish that I make all the time with venison, like in the spring with venison steak on repeat. And that's what I wanted to this book to have, those like go-to recipes that are like a weeknight staple, because it sounds fancy, but it's only a handful of ingredients that come together very fast. The summer, we do a lot of fishing here. I live in Rockport, Texas now. We love to sight cast redfish, and I talk a little bit about that in the book. And there's a recipe that's kind of a riff on Paul Prudhomme's blackened redfish, and tell the
Mhm.
story. If anybody's familiar with like the red drum fishery going to the brink of extinction, and the height of blackened redfish and restaurants because of Paul Prudhomme in Louisiana. So I have a kind of a riff on that story, but it's Tex-Mex style. It's not seasoned with Creole. It's seasoned with like chili, ancho, cumin, and oregano, and it's on a bed of sweet corn grits, or yeah, sweet corn grits. So you basically take corn, you grate it into grits as you're making it. So it's a really lovely pairing. Do you want me to go through every season?
Yeah, well, yeah. So we got fall game season, bird
Yeah,
dogs, brown butter.
fall is a hard one to pick too. Gosh. Yeah, so I'll say that my favorite fall dish is a venison steak with sage and brown butter. And this goes back to kind of what you were saying earlier of like things that animals eat and the habitat they live in pair well together. Um, Sagebrush is like my favorite native plant that grows all the way, you know, you find them quail hunting in South Texas all the way up into Canada, and they're more in the arid climates, you know, of the western part of the US, but they're just really important to the ecosystems, and a lot of those animals browse on that brush. And so this recipe pays homage to that with garden sage, and it's just sage seasoned on the steak, and then you just baste it with brown butter. It couldn't be any easier. And it's just those two combination is just like quintessential fall. And brown butter. I mean, it's fall right now, so I mean, I'm just like drooling thinking about it. And the winner, one of my favorites is a very understated recipe for rabbit and some root vegetables. It's just such a simple, hearty soup with um primarily potato, but I use turnips a lot because I think a lot of people don't think about cooking with turnips, and you can treat it just like a potato, but it's got a lot of leeks in it and some cream. It's just a really nice, hearty, comforting soup.
And that's the rabbit leek and root vegetable dish.
Yep. Yep.
That is incredible. And I know you talked too a little bit about some squirrel inclusion in certain things. And I know you talked about you had like garden revenge squirrels, right? They take out some of the stuff that you guys grow, and so you got to throw those in. And there's some interchangeability in different things that you kind of talk about too. But that definitely was a quite an interesting dish. Highlighted that one as well. I know, what I was actually, my wife had sent me, Meg, she sent me, it was a video you did recently, and I think you called it the Summer on a Plate. Now, I know that's not in the book here, but it was a balsamic grilled venison and heirloom
Oh yeah.
tomato with, like, I think it was like a miso honey in there. Can you tell me a little bit about that dish? Because that's one that we've circled as we're definitely going to be trying that one out.
Yeah, so tomatoes, we can grow them for a huge part of the year here in Texas. And so I like pairing them with venison steak in the summer or any of the hotter times of the month. Like right now, even though it's fall, it's still like summer food to me.
Yeah.
It's fall everywhere else, but um so yeah, so I make a balsamic reduction, and you can buy that already made, like a balsamic glaze. But it's very easy to do. You basically just take balsamic vinegar and reduce it on the stove top. I don't add any sugar. It actually naturally has enough sugar that you can get it down to a glaze. That recipe you were talking about, I just add a little bit of miso to it to kind of give it this like extra umami flair and flavor, because it's the recipe itself is sort of um inspired by, oh gosh, there, what's the name of that restaurant on the river in Green?
Oh,
um they do their famous balsamic grilled steak, and so that's kind of what the riff is. And so I basically make that balsamic glaze, put it on the grill, like I sear it, season it, sear it, baste it with that glaze, and keep on like flipping it on the grill until that glaze sort of caramelizes a little bit. And then you pair it with your tomatoes and a little extra glaze, and then I um have some really good olive oil with some toasted garlic, and basil. It's like a caprese steak.
yeah, yeah.
A caprese salad with steak. That's what it is.
Nice. Well, moving back to the cookbook, at the tail end of the cookbook, after you've kind of gone through the seasonal dishes, and you have a section too about things better homemade, where you got
Mhm.
mayo, pickles, sausages, rub, seasoning, stocks. And I think that's a definite highlight that people need to check out. Because there's a lot of things you can make on your own. You just might need to go good and give it a little try and kind of experiment a bit. And one of the things that, it struck me, there was a post that you talked about. This might have been about a year ago, even. You're talking about when you're making stocks and that you roast a lot of the things before make a stock. Now, I've always kind of just taken, if I have, some leftovers, bones and carcass, whatever, something, I kind of throw it in the water and I'm making my own stock. But it had never occurred to me, or I just didn't know about the idea of roasting it. And I was kind of curious about what that changes for you, how that might enhance flavors. What was it that, how is that beneficial for those who are making their own stocks?
So think of it like cooking meat. Say you've got a recipe, and almost every recipe involving meat involves searing, sauteing, or frying, grilling, high heat the meat first. Like if you're going to make a stew, you're going to sear that meat and then you add all those liquids, because searing that is what you're doing. It's called the Maillard reaction, where the proteins and the sugars in that heat, they sort of caramelize into this like really meaty flavor that it's the thing that makes you drool. And they say like it's an evolutionary thing that happens. Like that's how we used to know that food was safe to eat, is whenever you smell that and you get hungry. So that's like what you're doing first. It's the exact same thing with stock. It's the same application. You're roasting those bones because you're trying to create sort of those meaty brown flavors that sort of make that dish more savory. It adds more savoriness to it. So it's the same thing. Roasting is just an easy way. You can't really sear bones because of the shape of it. So it's easier to just coat it, depending on what it is. Like venison, you can coat it with a little tomato paste and then roast it. And that tomato paste just sort of adds even more rich flavors to it. Birds, I don't like to add tomato paste. I think some people like it. I think it makes it a little too rich and a little too heavy. I want it to be a little bit on the lighter side, but I still like to roast it, and then you throw that in the pot with your veggies in the water.
Right on. And I wanted to also real quick mention the book cover, and I was curious, what dish is that and why did that make the front cover? Because I mean, the cover of book is always a very important thing. What was it about that one? Does that, you're like, I want to do that, or does the photograph and that meal just turned out so great? You're like, I think that's the one we're going to go with. Curious about your approach on that.
I picked that one out before we photographed, that I wanted that recipe to be the cover. That recipe, there's 2 roasted pheasants, and the story on that is when we lived in North Dakota, we had our tradition of going pheasant hunting every morning on Thanksgiving because nobody else was in the field.
Great time. Sure.
By the way, if you're ever looking for like the best time to go hunting on public land, pick a holiday. Christmas, Thanksgiving, you got the place to yourself. That's like my hot tip. And so we used to do that, and I would always, by the time when we came back home, I had a pheasant already plucked and ready to go, throw it in the oven. I had my sides prepped, so we'd go hunting. I'd come home, I'd shower, throw the birds in the oven, and we'd have our Thanksgiving that afternoon or evening, just the 2 of us. And we did that for like 4 or 5 years, and it was a really special memory for me. And I wanted that to be on the cover because the editors wanted something that like that you could look at it and say, okay, that's wild game. And so, I was trying to think about, venison is a hard one because it just looks like, red meat. And a bird is a much more iconic. And I think more specifically, you'll notice the feet are still attached. And that really bothers a lot of people. And I thought my editors were just going to say, absolutely not. Because some people are very turned off. And for me, I think a big part of what this book is all about is getting outside, connecting to your food, and like the reminder that there was a life, there was an animal that died for your meal. we don't like to be reminded of that when we go to the grocery store and buy something wrapped in plastic. And so I think in a way that those feet really sort of signify that notion of knowing this animal, this animal's life, that became your meal.
Well, and I also like that it kind of ties back in that first experience of you pheasant hunting and cooking your first meal for yourself. It
Yeah.
feels like a full 360 to come
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
around to that. And I liked that. It kind of nods to that. And obviously you tell that story. Um, you talk about in the book too, there's like 6 ways to live and eat more consciously. And that was a very important thing. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about that. And what are some of the other things that you kind of really hope that settle in with your readers and that you hope to be able to convey about the importance of, wild game cooking, of eating consciously, of, working within your environment, whether it's, foraging or, what you're growing in the garden. What is it that you hope that people can kind of take away when they pick up this book and, go through that?
I think you really hit on all the key points. I think the one thing that I want to caveat is that while this book is meant to be something of an inspiration and a glimpse into life, like what my personal lifestyle is, this is something that also took me years to get to a point of living. None of it happened overnight. I did not become a hunter and fisher 24/7, like year round, and a gardener and all these things overnight. And I think it can be really overwhelming, and very expensive to just they say, hey, all my meat's I'm gonna hunt for all my meat. It's gonna all come from a CSA basket. What I want people to understand is that you can embrace this type of lifestyle without being 100% all in, all or nothing. You can take elements of this that work and fit your lifestyle, because it is very difficult to hunt and fish year round. There's not very many people who are able to do that, and I feel extremely fortunate to be able to have that opportunity. And I think to be able to say I'm putting this amount of money to the side and that's my CSA basket. um it's a hard thing to do, and I don't expect people to be able to do it all the time. But what I want is to be able to feel inspired to take and find something, a part of that works for their life.
Well, I think you've done an amazing job with it. It's a phenomenal book. I'm very excited. Everyone, it comes out October 8th, wherever books are sold. I know that there's places people can, pre-order, Barnes& and Noble, themeateater.com. And, for those who want to follow you a little bit more and kind of see, as this, continues to evolve and, the dishes that you have to share and your work with MeatEater, where can people go ahead and follow you on your socials and, websites there?
Yeah, I'm on the main social channels: Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok. Although I'm not very active on TikTok. Danielle Prewett is my handle, just my name. So I'm pretty easy to find. And then you can find a lot of stuff that I do for MeatEater on our YouTube channel.
Yep. And then also, if you go to themeateater.com and you search your name there too, there will be a list of a ton of different articles and different recipes there too. So I highly suggest people go and check that out as well.
Yeah.
A question that I ask a lot of my, guests, and I was curious to get your take, is one about legacy. What is it that you hope to be able to leave behind? Obviously, you're involved in doing some amazing work in and of yourself, and then working with, the MeatEater and all those that fall under the umbrella. I mean, it's obviously a juggernaut of individuals that are really helping, education, entertaining, and conservation, all the different things that are kind of underneath that. But I was kind of curious what it is that you kind of hope that you can, leave your mark by leaving, behind some of these things. What is it you think about legacy at all? Obviously, being a new parent too is, as far as in a personal setting, what is it that, you hope to, kind of be an example for, your kiddo? And I know it's a big question. You can kind of tackle it
It
however you
is.
want.
I mean, food is great. Like recipes are wonderful. I really like to cook or develop recipes for the home cook. I'm not here to be a Michelin star chef or work at a restaurant. I'm here to help people make the best of the food that they hunt or forage. That's what the recipes are tailored to do. But as far as legacy, and now that I have a kid, I'm looking out my back window. We just bought like a little 3 acres in Rockport, and it backs up to a bird sanctuary. And one of the things that I'm most excited about is getting to share with my son um, the excitement of just watching birds. Like I want him to know the difference of hunting birds and appreciating wildlife without having to shoot them. I want him to understand what conservation means. And I want to like how hunting ties into that. But the idea of just being able to sit back there and watch migration come in and have that appreciation and know that you can enjoy this beautiful sanctuary. There's an alligator out there. I had, all the native plants. Like I want them to find that appreciation for this little piece that we have that's been left alone and untouched, and we get to watch it and know the difference between that and not needing to kill everything. But we're also going to take them hunting, and that's going to be a big deal. But I think so. When I think of legacy, I think of I think of conservation, and I think of what we have to leave for the future for the future is all going to be rooted in how we take care of the things today. I'm very, very into planting native species of plants and preserving native habitats, which it sounds strange. I'm a recipe developer. I wrote a cookbook, but truly at the heart of everything I do, it's all about the preservation of our wildlife and our resources. And so that's kind of the legacy that I want to pass, is to pass that enthusiasm and love for the land.
Well said. Well, Danielle, I really appreciate you joining me today. I'm really excited for your book to hit the shelves. I think everyone's going to love it. It's phenomenal. Once again, we told you everyone where you can kind of pick it up. I will have some links in the show notes below. That is Wild and Whole Seasonal Recipes for the Conscious Cook. Comes out October 8th. Make sure you guys go ahead and make your pre-orders, order them. And yes, once again, I really appreciate it, and all the best to
Yeah.
you. And hope you have a great hunting season.
Yeah.
It's upon us, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
you as well. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. You're welcome. We'll talk soon. You take care.
Thanks.